Okay, so we'll first start off with your name.
I'm Ray Pennock.
And when and where were you born?
I was born and raised in Meadowdale.
So you grew up in Meadowdale? Did you stay there throughout?
Where the St. Thomas More Catholic Church is where I was born and raised, on a 10-acre fruit farm.
Wow. What kind of fruit? Just every kind
A wide
of fruit?
variety,
Did
primarily cherries, sweet cherries.
Did you work on that farm then when you were younger?
All my youth.
Yeah. Did you stay in Meadowdale as an adult, or did you move away from Meadowdale?
I was living at home primarily as my residence, but of course at 18, off to the Army, and then I lived on campus at the University of Washington, but home base was still Meadowdale.
That's awesome. So you said you went into the Army. How long were you in the Army then?
Well, I was in the Army from 1943 to 45. Primarily was at Camp Roberts in California in 43 and 45, taking basic training, and then becoming the start of my personnel administration career. I became a corporal as an Army personnel clerk, which I was until the manpower requirements in the backup of D-Day. While all the people I had dealt with went to the South Pacific, I headed for Europe. So I am a veteran of the Battle of the Bulge and the next two campaigns, as well as serving as a mail clerk both on the Atlantic Ocean and supporting APO 129 in England and France before I went to the front lines.
Wow.
As basically a combat non-com. And talking about my family a little bit, the 5 Pennock family members arrived in Meadowdale, Washington in 1919. Father Ridge, Arthur Ridgman, Mother Mabel Elliott, her maiden name, and their 3 children, Clara, Arthur, and Gladys. Raymond joined the family in 1924. Dad was a Puget Mill Company supply boat captain, lumberman, farmer, school bus driver, and worked with his team on many Meadowdale properties. As time passed, our 10-acre stump ranch became a very diversified orchard and farm. In his later years, Dad worked for Snohomish County Road District Number 2 as a foreman, and for several years before retirement as the District Number 2 Superintendent of Roads. All 4 Pennock children graduated from Edmonds High School. Clara became a graduate nurse at the Seattle General Hospital. She finished her nursing career at the Edmonds Visiting Nurses Program Supervisor. My brother Art graduated from the Seattle Metropolitan Business College in accounting, and he served as a bank manager before opening his own accounting business in South Everett. He served in the Army during World War II in the South Pacific. My sister Gladys became a Navy officer's wife and was in Hawaii on December 7th, 1941. She created several dozen absolutely beautiful ornaments from goose and duck eggs, and had many other artistic abilities. After service in the war, I returned to the University of Washington, majoring in personnel administration, and served in that field for 32 years for the Boeing Company.
So you talked a little bit about your siblings. Were you close with them? Would you say you were close with your siblings?
I didn't hear you.
Oh, were you close with your siblings? Like, were you close with your brother and sisters?
Oh, very much. In fact, I'm at 11 o'clock tomorrow attending my older sister's Gladys's funeral.
Oh, I'm sorry. So, were you the last child in the
I'm
family?
the baby of the family.
The baby. Let's see. Would you say, or what would you say your best childhood memory is?
Well, I inherited at 12 my sister's clarinet. At 18, I was playing in the University of Washington marching and concert bands. And music impacted, and people in my class or in school would probably remember me as the clarinetist in the band and orchestra as much as anything else. While I did not play on any of the formal college teams, I played basketball on the Juvenile Grange, Cedar Valley Juvenile Grange team, as well as in an intramural league in school. I had my own team, and we were at the top of the league.
Wow. Would you say basketball has changed a lot, or has it pretty much stayed the same, just the outfits changed?
I followed the Sonics for many years, and once you're in the marching band at the university, you're a Husky forever.
So did you learn the clarinet through school, or did your sister help you figure out how to do that?
The high school band instructor was my source of instruction, and interestingly, he played in the second John Philip Sousa's band as a musician himself.
Wow, you're lucky you got to. Let's see. What do you think your I could ask this. What would you do for fun in high school? In Sleepy Edmonds.
Well, in high school, you name the activity. You already know of my band and orchestra activity, but I was on the debate squad, and
in the plays at John Beck Club,
and was in both the senior and junior plays, as well as being an officer in each of the three honor societies, Torch, Quill and Scroll, and Thespians. And I was privileged as a junior to receive a national award for sports writing for the Wireless, which was our school paper in those days. So I was an active person in school, and have been since.
That's good. Can you explain to me the honor society sections? What were the names of it?
Well, your grade level qualified you for torch,
Oh, okay.
and then I was a torch secretary as a senior.
Okay. Yeah, we don't really have anything like that anymore. I mean, sort of, but let's see. What else can we talk about? What was your favorite book as a child or teen?
Excuse me?
Your favorite book in your
Well,
in your childhood?
Jim just has been able to obtain a copy of my 1st Division Army 18th Regiment history book, and have just had a chance to, not only from Africa, but all the way through the European Theater of Operations, the 1st Division, be brought up to date on it. I had been keeping a log that was in my duffel bag, and when I got wounded the second time, I went straight to the hospital, didn't have any further contact with that. So receiving that book here just recently is
That's amazing.
pretty high on my list.
That's amazing.
But as a boy, there were 4 different books, and I'm forgetting what they were that I read as a book. But as a boy, we had big little books, yea big, so thick, and so on. And one of the interesting stories of it was that my dad looked over my shoulder one day, and I was reading Buck Rogers in Space. And his comment to me is, why are you reading that? We'll never see anything like that. So currently, one of my favorite half-hour duties at the Museum of Flight is in the Destiny module, which is an exact mock-up of a part of the space station. Mm-hmm. And so here we have now a quarter of a century of space activity, and back in the 30s, that didn't seem very likely.
That's amazing. It's really cool. A lot has changed. So was your mom just a stay-at-home mom then? She took care of you kids, and your dad was the one that worked in the family?
Well, my mother was a very skilled cook, and I remember now, electricity did not come to my home until I was 10.
Wow.
So we're dealing with outhouses, carrying water from a well about 40 to 50 yards away from the house until electricity can be directed not to that well, but to the one at the far end of the farm. And now we have indoor plumbing and facilities that you these days take for granted.
Definitely. Let's see.
My mother also, if we were to have any money or any gifts under the Christmas tree, Dad and I would go out and harvest Christmas trees, and she would come back and bundle them up by size, and they would go down to Seattle and become other people's Christmas trees.
Wow.
But
that's cool.
Being an immigrant family from Canada, all of the 5 members of the family immigrated down from Canada. Dad homesteaded on the prairies outside of Irma, Alberta, Canada.
Okay.
And my 3 brothers and sisters were all born at that location in Canada.
Wow, that's cool. Did your either of your parents have relatives that stayed in Canada then, or were they the only ones that came to? Were they the only ones that came to America back then, or did any of their siblings or
They
just the
came
only
down
ones?
here as the first West Coast Pennock folks, as far as we know. There are Pennocks all over the country and all over Canada, But I think I'd probably go back to an Ontario
Somewhere.
family with 6 brothers.
Wow.
And I think my grandfather was possibly one of those Pennock families.
That's cool. It's good that you've traced some stuff. Let's see. When did you meet? This is your wife, correct?
We met at the University of Washington. We were both members of the management club there, and I was president, and she was a member, and my elected secretary decided that her best interests were to go to Alaska and remind her fiancé who was the most important person in his life. That allowed the president to appoint a secretary, and already attracted to Ruth, she became the secretary, and she claims she still is that.
Still typing for him.
Oh my goodness. So then you guys had kids together?
We have 2 sons. Jim here's number 1 son, and Phil is number 2. And I think at this point, Jim, you're briefly mentioning your career is most appropriate.
I'm an electrical engineer, graduate of the University of Washington, and graduate school down at Stanford in California. And then after finishing that and meeting my lovely wife down there, I've been working as an electrical engineer in the local industry ever since. Started in '76, and I'm still going.
Wow.
So.
Awesome. And the other brother or other son, does he live around here or
Phil,
going back this way?
Phil, our younger son, is married to Diane, and he is a senior keeper at the Woodland Park Zoo.
That's cool. I want to be a zoologist when I grow up. That's interesting. How long has he been doing that?
Now, Jim and Beth, of course, have our granddaughter Laurel, who at the moment with our great-granddaughter is in Australia visiting friends. And Clementine then rounds up our basic family.
Amazing. Let's see.
You were asking about Phil and
Oh.
how
You know,
long
yeah.
how long has he? He's late 70s. He
Okay.
became a keeper at the zoo and has been there ever since.
Cool. Let's see. What else can we go? So, are you a religious person?
Ruth and I have been members of the Crown Hill United Methodist Church for 55 or so years, and there I have been lay leader, chairman of the finance committee, the missions committee, was chairman of the 75th anniversary of the church, and Sunday school teacher, and we still attend that church quite regularly.
Very active in the church. So, would you say you have experienced any miracles?
Yeah, this week I got rid of a whole bunch of junk around the house. And the man took it away for no cost. But to have survived the 3 campaigns in combat, yes,
So
that's
you're
a
lucky.
miracle.
Yeah. What would you say, or do you believe in an afterlife?
I will be mentioning that my sister has joined her husband's spirit in heaven in the my remarks tomorrow at her funeral.
So, back to a little bit of family heritage. You said your family immigrated from Canada, but was there any immigration before that from Europe, like a specific part of Europe, or are you a Canadian mutt?
The Elliott family, my mother's side of the family, was in East Michigan before going up to Canada.
Oh.
But basically, my basic family is Canadian.
Just Canadian. Cool. So, what do you think are the most important and meaningful lessons you've learned in your life?
Well, growing up on the farm, there was always lots of work to do. And from it, of course, that has stood by me during my career, that I always felt I should do a day's work for whoever was paying me. And in school, of course, I felt I was very well educated in the Edmonds Grade School and Edmonds High School and the University of Washington. And there you learned, if you were going to obtain a reasonable grade, that you had to study and be abreast of whatever subject you were dealing with. I also, in school, felt that learning how to speak on the debate team and in other situations in the plays and so forth in school, that was an important skill to develop and have, of course, used all my life. And, of course, a personnel man is a professional listener. So somewhere along the line, I picked up that skill as well.
What would you say you're most proud of?
Well, my first career as a clarinetist, and to end up on the grass of Husky Stadium, and then to qualify through audition for the concert band, was that. But Ruth and I have had two great sons, and of course the most important decision in my life was to decide to marry a Phi Beta Kappa.
What would you say the happiest moment or happiest moments in your life?
Well, we have been able to attend 4 World's Fairs. The 1962 Seattle one, the 64 World's Fair in New York, the 74 Fair in Spokane, and then the 1986 World's Fair up in Vancouver, British Columbia, which we attended 3 times. And one of the intriguing parts of one of our visits is we had taken, up at Vancouver, we had taken our neighbor with us. And Betty had the habit of wearing absolutely attractive sweaters with animals on them. And on one occasion, I was going down an exhibit at the fair, and all of a sudden I turned around and they were several exhibits behind me, and I couldn't figure out why, because I really didn't think the exhibits on that particular row was our particular interest. And then when they caught up with me, why, I said, "What took you so long?" And Betty said, "Everybody wanted to ask about my sweater."
Oh my goodness. That's funny. Let's see. How would you like to be remembered?
I have already been remembered. The Ballard chapter of the Rotary International has made me a J. Paul Harris Fellow for my community service. Mr. Harris is the founder of Rotary.
Wow. Amazing.
And in 1938, my title of a paper that the teacher insisted us compose, the title of it was Aviation as a Career. So 32 and a half years at Boeing as a personnel man, and now 25 years at the Museum of Flight as a docent. What do you think? Don't you think I fulfilled that paper pretty well?
Definitely. Do you want to explain what that Museum of Flight or Boeing thing that you had with? Explain what that was.
One of the honors that the museum recently gave to me in their Aloft magazine of the October 2011 issue was a full-page summary of my life under the caption Volunteer Spotlight. So this is the monthly magazine of the Museum of Flight.
That's awesome.
And I sleep under an Indian chief's blanket given to me for my service to the United Methodist Native American Urban Outreach Program back a decade or so ago. And of course you're looking at me with a Museum of Flight jacket with a gold emblem on it representing 5,000 hours of volunteer service at the museum.
Wow. You're really dedicated to that. It's awesome.
Ray, you might want to tell her the other volunteer jobs that you've done.
Thank you, Beth. At the same time, in 1987, that I got involved at the Museum of Flight, I also was invited by the Boeing Management Retirement Association to go out and sort the food that current Boeing employees had donated during the holidays in November and December for distribution to the food bank. So following us helping to sort that food coming home, I wondered what would be the movement or the time phase of that going out to the food banks. And that day in the mail, the local Ballard newspaper indicated that the North End Emergency Fund wanted to have some volunteers. So I went down and became their chief storekeeper and have been on their board of directors for several years, and I'm currently a director emeritus of the Ballard Magnolia North Queen Anne Food Bank. I also
might mention Winnie Young.
I also during my activities in the community, when Jim and Phil were in Scouts, I was a Boy Scout merit badge counselor and a junior achievement advisor, and I am a past secretary and president of the Lost Lake Property Owners Association up on Camino Island, past president of the Old Settlers of South Snohomish and North King County, and I followed my father in that role. I've mentioned being a docent at the museum and my different activities at church. I also was on the board of directors of the Ballard Family Center and was involved in the requirement by the state for advanced planning for the Crown Hill Ballard community here a few years ago.
Wow. You've done a lot of volunteer work. You deserve all the awards you can get. So, is there anything about Edmonds, Edmonds history, or Edmonds High School, Edmonds schools that you'd like to add that we didn't talk about? Like your experience in the schools a little more in depth or anything?
The Meadowdale I grew up in, of course, was before asphalt and concrete. So I walked to catch a school bus in muddy roads much of the year, and would end up in school with wet feet. But the area of South Snohomish County that, of course, Edmonds High School is serving, and the other high schools now, but it was on the edge back in the late 20s, early 30s of the metropolitan spread of Seattle. So in the 5th grade of grade school, the Esperance 5th graders joined us at Edmonds because of the influx of people overcrowding the Esperance school. They could just then take 4 grades instead of the 7 grades that they had previously done. And of course, Alderwood Manor grade school was through the 8th grade. But because of the influx of so forth, I actually spent 5 years at the Edmonds High School, my 8th grade being in the high school building.
Wow.
And not until several years later did I realize that was creating a major conflict between the folks coming down from Alderwood Manor to Edmonds. Because having been there a year, I was completely familiar with the school, and sometimes I would take a shortcut up at some manor to go to a classroom or something, and that just bugged the Alderwood kids no end.
Ray, you might want to also tell her about crossing Highway 99.
We were, of course, on the farm from 1919, well before Highway 99 was built. And taking the horses down across 99 the first time, my dad very carefully cautioned me, now if you see a car coming in either way, you wait until they pass. So on my first trip down with the horse and the wagon, not a car in either direction, and so we leisurely crossed it. The last time, a few years later, we galloped across.
Wow. And 99 would have been gravel and dirt then?
In what?
99 was it gravel and dirt, or was it, when did it become paved?
Oh.
You know?
Well, as Dad became foreman for the South End area here, and the population, of course, increased the amount of money.
Yeah.
Why, blacktop and activity went on, but
Yeah.
I rode my bicycle down to Edmonds. The Beverly Park Road was paved on the real snaky part of the road,
Yeah.
but only that far.
Okay.
At one point on it, you make a 90-degree turn and come east, and from that way all the way up to Everett, it was gravel during the 20s and 30s.
Wow.
But in the late 40s and in the 50s, then we started becoming a much more easily traveled area. You see, the mud, after a snowstorm or a freezing period of time, the mud became absolutely soft. And if you were lucky as you were driving your car along and the wheels dropped down into that soft, the softer area, if your back wheels was still on solid ground, maybe you could back out and go around somebody. But Dad frequently got a call at home, could you bring the team over and pull my car out of the mud? So
Wow.
that was the type of road construction, and that made Lower Meadowdale and Upper Meadowdale really two distinctly different communities.
Mm.
So you went all the way down to Perrinville to go on the Lower Meadowdale Road, or went down the very steep hill, the Meadowdale Road hill. That was the only direct access, and with the muddy roads, if you didn't need to do it, why you went there. And as I say, electricity and the telephone did not come to our home until I was 10 in 1934. So again, that limited communication. And 99, once it was in, to call across 99 was long distance.
Wow.
Because Meadowdale and Edmonds was served by the Meadowdale Telephone Exchange, and a different telephone company was on the east side of 99. In other words, if you had a business on 99 on the west side, to call to the business directly in front of you across the street was long distance. So some of the businesses there had two phones to allow their customers from either side of 99 to call without paying a toll.
Wow. That's different.
I heard another question that Sydney was asking, though, about 99. When it was constructed, was it paved from the beginning, or was it a gravel road when it started?
Basically, 99, Jim, was chartered through areas that there was no road. So to me, 99 was always concrete.
Okay.
In fact, at Hemlock Road, there wasn't any. You went across the right-of-way for 99 on up to what was called the Cedar Way in those days, but there wasn't a roadway in the 99 right-of-way.
Okay. So we've got about 2 minutes left. Is there another story or something important that you'd like to talk about before we end?
Well, I would say our travels as the boys were growing up to the Rockies on down to seeing the huge streets in Salt Lake City and on down to the Grand Canyon, as well as our drive in a new car across the United States to New York, to Massachusetts and New York in '64 was pretty special. And one of the interesting things there was that we were getting feedback that all the reservations were taken up, but driving up in a new car with Washington State license plates at a motel that said no vacancies, they shuffled the deals and we were taken care of, Ruth and I and the two boys. And then that gave us a perfect exit on down to the New York World's Fair. And Jim, of course, when he was at Stanford, we went down to his graduation. So we did a bit of traveling and thoroughly enjoyed it, and are not able to do that as much today.
Traveling is awesome. My mom was a flight attendant for 6 years before she was laid off October of 2001. Obviously, because of 9/11, they didn't have as many flights going out, so they didn't need flight attendants. But while she was a flight attendant, I got to travel everywhere with her. I was young, but and ever since then, it's interesting that you're so into flight and everything,
We
because
run
flight
out of
is
time
fun.
now?
We've still got a little bit of time.
Excuse me?
Still have a little bit of time.
Okay.
But
One of the things on your questionnaire is one of the most unhappy moments in my life. When the Boeing company lost its Dinosaur contract at 2:30 in the afternoon, I got a call from my boss, and he said, before you leave today, be sure that you notify all the people working for you that they're on 2 weeks layoff notice.
Wow.
And that, of course, was very distressing to them. We were able to place them in other areas, but I had the junior crew, and that was a pretty tough task
I'm sure.
for me to do.
Yeah, that'd be really
And
hard.
at Christmas time, as a boy, Canadian friends from Canada lived in Granite Falls and had the Granite Falls gas station and motel on the west side of Granite Falls. And if we were up there at Christmas, they would be down at our place for New Year's, or vice versa, year by year.
Mm-hmm.
And while the event was excellent, in the open type window touring cars of that time, that became a mighty cold ride for me in the back seat.
Yeah. Would you guys like to add anything? Ask any questions? Anything?
You just might want to talk about sending the food down to the Pike Place Market, packing the cherries.
Oh, your mother packing the cherries.
Oh, with sweet cherries, primarily the Lambert, our primary product, Mother would take a small box, which would hold about 15 to 20 pounds, and take the very best cherries out of the picking and individually place them in a row at the bottom of the box, row after row after row after row.
With the stems up.
And then the loose pack was poured on top of that, and the top of the box then nailed down. Then as it went to a retail store, it was turned around, and what had been the bottom was removed, and that lay a beautiful
Perfect.
row of Lambert cherries now for retail store display.
Wow, that's interesting.
And teaching my sister that, Gladys then went across to the neighbors and fancy packed for their cherries as well.
Fancy packed. Is there anything you'd like to add? Nope. All right. I think that's it then.